As I've indicated in page 26, we're going to be reviewing the new item, or some people refer to it as the new part notice information. Then we're going to discuss engineering change notice information and likewise obsolescence. Pages 27 and 28 identify all of the data elements to be considered in the new part or new item notice program. We start off with the new part number, and you see this is a byproduct of the new part number program. The item description, which is item 2, and item 3 is the unit of measure. Then we get into the inventory classification codes, and those are codes that were developed for various clients of ours. There's 18 different class codes, and those we go into great detail on relative to some of our other seminars or under, I should say, the auspices of the inventory management program. We have item 5, which is the shelf life code. We have the item cost. Some people refer to it as the unit cost. Then we have the purchase order date of the asset and the order number. And then we have vendor information relative to the asset. The name, address, telephone number, primary contact, the vendor part number, description, and the lead time. Now the same data in item number 8 is applicable for spare parts. So we're addressing a new item notice, whether it's a new piece of equipment or a new spare part. Item 9 addresses all of the data for the new spare parts list. And here again, we're addressing the part number, the description, the unit of measure, the inventory class code, the shelf life code, the vendor part number for the spare part, the vendor description, the lead time, and the item revision number. And when we receive a new item, let's say a new piece of equipment, a new process, as we would with a new spare part, the revision number should always start off with revision A. That's a common starting point in industry. Then as revisions are made, the first revision would be revision B, the third revision C, and so forth. Now continuing on in page 28, we have the item revision number. Now the number is different than the revision code. The item revision number is a numeric number. The numeric number is very similar in nature to a purchase order number. And it identifies how many revisions, or in this case, new item revisions have we processed year to date, or how many have we processed at year end. We have the new part notice number. Now that again is similar to the purchase order number. Not the PO number on this particular new piece of equipment or part. Again, it's assigned straight numeric. We can keep track of how many new pieces of equipment we've received, and also how many new part numbers have been identified. If there are blueprints and tracings, then we would identify those. And you notice the YN, it's yes or no. Do I have it? Yes, I assign identity to it. If it's no, I just bypass it. We have installation information, which is provided by the supplier, dismantling or moving information, operational information. Operational would be power, electricity, voltage, current, pneumatic, hydraulic, water applications, whatever is required would all go under operational. The recommended PM program, the recommended minor and major overhaul program, and see those would be used as planned requirements by the planner scheduler. We have the training program for maintenance personnel, likewise training program for machine operators. We also want to take into consideration safety features of the equipment, warranty and service provisions. that is identified by the supplier. And then we want to make certain that we are updating all of the various records, whether they're manually or computerized, and that would include the item master record with the spare parts, the inventory record, the storeroom record, the purchase record, the maintenance work order planning and scheduling record, and then the financial data. We also are interested in the installation date and the operational date. It is that date which we're going to determine the frequency of planned maintenance requirements through the PM program, and also planned maintenance major and minor overhauls. So those are the data elements relative to the new part notice. On page 29 is an example of a new part notice that we've developed for one of our particular clients. And again, I'm not going to go through and read everything. All of the data, or most all of the data, I should say, that is on the preceding 2 pages is addressed here in the new part notice form. This is the document that is originated and circulated to all of the individuals that have record responsibility. This is the discipline required to keep new items up to date in our maintenance management program. New pieces of equipment and new spare parts. Now, the next series of pages pertain to the engineering change notice information. And there are 2 types of changes that occur. There could be a change on the equipment or process itself, or there could be a change based upon a spare part by itself. So the engineering change notice system should be designed to take care of both types of changes. Again, starting off with the part number, the description, the unit of measure, and the reason for the change. And here that would have to be described in total. Does this change affect design of the product? Now, the bill includes the spare parts if this were a piece of equipment. Does it change the maintenance process? If the answer is yes, then that means the planner scheduler has to change any planned work orders that are currently in the planning and scheduling system. And does it affect the cost? And if it does, the cost records would likewise have to be changed. The items affected could be through the spare parts where used list. So that would be item 2 of the 9 items in our maintenance management program. Then we would have the disposition of inventory on hand. If an old piece of equipment is being replaced by the new, or a spare part is being replaced by a new spare part, then we have to develop the procedures to intelligently dispose of that inventory. Most companies follow the recommendations of disposition that we have developed. First of all, you want to have any disposition done through a bonded scrap dealer. Secondly, you want to receive certification from the bonded scrap dealer that the final disposition either was through a melt shop program where the material, if it's conducive to smelting or melting down, or secondly, it goes into what is called a bonded landfill program. Each of those, through a bonded scrap dealer, will make certain that your equipment or spare parts do not get recycled by some third party and ultimately find their way into the marketplace. The disposition of inventory on hand, we've just discussed. Open orders of items affected, if any. The disposition of open orders. Do I cancel an order? Do I issue a new order for the new item? Or do I just merely send a change notice to the supplier if it's for a purchased item? Then we have the costs related to the engineering change. Inventory disposition, any labor. Internal labor would include such things as cannibalizing a piece of equipment where maybe I can remove some of parts that can go right into inventory to be recycled on the next planned or unplanned maintenance work order. The material of that particular item, the tooling, the equipment, and other outside contractor expenses or engineering. Now let me go back up to 11C for just 1 minute. I talk about material. When I refer to material, I'm talking about that sheet iron and any I-beams. Most of that material would be for construction purposes, may not be directly related to the piece of equipment. In item number 12, we have the engineering change notice number. We have the current revision number. If I have revision A, my current revision number would be A. The new revision number would be B. The effective date of the engineering change notice, the originator, and all of the approvals relative to the engineering change notice itself. Now, the data that we've just reviewed on page 30 is identified on the engineering change notice form, which is on page 31. And this document would again be circulated like the new part notice system, and it therefore would keep all of our records, all the records I identified previously, up to date with the current changes that are a byproduct of the engineering change notice system. Now, the last discipline is the obsolescence policy, and we've defined what we mean by obsolescence on page 32. When a piece of equipment or an item is no longer required, get rid of it. Don't be a string saver, okay? Now, we can sell it, we can cannibalize it, or we could scrap it outright, okay? Those are generally your three options. Now, in order to do this properly, we need the spare parts where used list, and which I've identified on page 33. If you remember, previously I said there are 9 functions in the maintenance management program. The first function is the equipment and the spare parts list. The second is the spare parts where used list. We're going to look at both of these so that you understand the importance of the spare parts list when we're talking about obsolescence. On page 33, we're talking about the procedure for obsolescence. We want, starting off with 1, list of the equipment assets where the spare part is used. We want the ability to process engineering change notices if an engineering change may be required. We want the ability to process equipment and spare parts obsolescence requirements. See, these are all byproducts of a spare parts where used list. The creation of a where used code. That code is a numeric number, and it is used by inventory management to develop safety stock for future unplanned requirements. If I reduce the numeric number by taking a part out of the where used list, it may have an impact on the inventory system. And that's what item 4 is addressing. The ability to develop spare parts standardization programs. Again, a byproduct of the where used list. The ability to develop cost reduction programs. And item number 7, what other applications do you think, as you go into the where used program, you need in order to expand the where used capability? Now, on the following exhibit, I've addressed the asset spare parts list for 3 assets. The assets are identified as A, B, C, and D. And let's assume that those are pieces of equipment. The numeric numbers below the asset are the spare parts. And to make it easy and put 4 pieces of equipment on one document here, we're using our little bubble number approach. So asset A has part numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Asset B has part numbers 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and so forth. Now this is the equipment spare parts list. Now what I want to do is I want to go to that second function within the maintenance management program and do the reciprocal of the spare parts list and generate a spare parts where used list. So if you would turn the page, you're going to see that we have a spare parts where used listing for the 9 spare parts that are identified as a byproduct of the equipment spare parts list. Directly beneath each spare part is the piece of equipment where that spare part is used in, and then all the way at the bottom we have the where used code. Now I'm going to merely address spare part 1, 2, and 3 to illustrate the where used code. In spare part 1, it is used in equipment A and C, and that you can get by going back to the previous page. Spare part 2 is only used in equipment A. Spare part 3 is only used in equipment A, B, and C. Now, if I go down to the where used code, the numeric number, I'm going to go back to part number 1. It's used in 2 pieces of equipment, A and C. Therefore, it has a where used code of 2. Spare part 2 is only used in equipment A. Therefore, it has a spare part code of 1. And likewise, 3 is used in 3 pieces of equipment, and it has a where used code of 3. If the where used code changes, and let's say if I go back to part number 1, and let's say I removed C out of production, the where used code goes to 1, from 2 to 1. That may impact the way the inventory management program is calculating future unplanned requirements. So therefore, this has to be, an integral part of the obsolescence program has to be an integral part of not only the part number program, but it has to be integral in communicating to the inventory system. Likewise to the purchasing system. As an example, if I took part number A out of production and I look at part number 2, it's only used in A. And if I had any 2s on hand, they're candidates for obsolescence. On the other hand, I may decide never to buy 2. So I may have some communique requirement to the supplier where I am purchasing part number 2. I may have a vendor stocking program established for part number 2. So in this case, it would affect not only inventory, but also purchasing. So what I've done next on page number 36 is to develop an obsolescence procedure using pages 34 and 35. And starting off with step 1, I'm indicating that we're going to take A out of production. Okay? So the next step, 2, would be the development of the spare parts list, which is located on page 34. Then what we're going to do is we're going to find out where those spare parts are used, and there I go to the where used list, which is on page 35. And you'll notice from step number 4, the spare parts used list on 35 indicates the spare part numbers 1, 3, 4, and 5 are used in other assets. But step 5 says that part number 2 is only used in A. Therefore, part number 2 is truly a candidate for obsolescence. Unfortunately, many CMMS systems do not have this where used capability. And that's why many storerooms are stuck with obsolescence because they don't know whether they should remove it from inventory or retain it. And that is one of the reasons on a previous exhibit we indicated that the first field 99 is for miscellaneous. That miscellaneous is a temporary identification first field commodity code for those items that are going to have to be reviewed to determine are they truly going to be required for future use or are they truly a candidate for obsolescence. And the balance of the procedures are self-explanatory except number 9. It indicates that you should have a formal program to remove the part not only from the maintenance program but for final disposition. And this now concludes section number 1, and we are now going to move into section 2, which identifies all of the different forms that are required for the new part numbering system. In section 2 of our part number program are the forms that you need to assist you in the development of not only the part numbers but the description, and also to get the part numbers and the descriptions into the proper records within either a manual or a computerized system, and the various documents that are going to be updated, such as the equipment and spare parts list and other applications. So I would like to have you address the next page, which identifies the various forms, and this is kind of an index to the forms, and it also indicates the number of forms that you have to consider in developing. First of all, form number 1 is the description to the first field. And here is where we develop the noun, if you will, for the commodity or the family. As an example, if I have abrasives would be recorded on the A sheet. A is A alpha. If I have batteries, then batteries would be recorded on the B sheet for batteries. If I have wire, wire would be recorded on the W sheet as wire, and so forth. Since we have 26 alpha characters, A to Z, we start off with 26 pages. Each page will be identified as A, B, C, etc. through Z. We have some examples in section number 3 on how those particular alpha sheets are developed. The second document required is the first field of the part number and cross-referencing that back to the alpha designator. As an example, if we have a 2-digit part number for the first field, then we need 4 pages for the second document, which is the first field to the description. We can pre-number the pages assuming we have, let's say, 25 lines per page. The first page would be pre-numbered 0, 1 to 26, as I've demonstrated here in step number 2, or for form 2. The second page would be 26 to 50, and so forth. So in this case, we would have 4 pages, and that would give us the ability to identify 99 different commodity codes. And I could tell you, with the hundreds of companies that we have worked with in developing part numbers, there was only one company where we actually went into a 3-digit first field, and you know it, that was the company that had in excess of 350,000 different part numbers. Generally, we can get by with a 2-digit first field. And the section 4 will have the first field numbers cross-referenced with the examples, okay, that we've selected for the notebook. Now, the third document is the summary page, where we actually show the first field and the commodity or family description. And that is a 1-page requirement, and we will show you what that document looks like before it's filled out and after it's filled out. The fourth document is the part number format and criteria. Now, I don't know how many pages you would need of this. It depends, number one, on how many commodity or family codes you're going to start off with, and how many second and third and fourth subclassifications that you're going to have. But the key here is to make certain that you have at least 20 characters set aside for the part number. And when we get to that document, I'll go into it in a little more detail, show you actually how it's used. The fifth document is the description format and criteria. And again, like my comments relative to the part number format and criteria, you're going to need as many pages as it takes to get the job done. In some cases, 4 and 5 could be 2, 3, 4, 500 pages in total. And these are the documents that are required to put the part number program together. And once the part number and description is complete, these documents can be filed. They could be put on microfiche, and at some later date, if you want to retrieve it, you have the opportunity to retrieve the data. Now, the next document, 6, is the part number description and the part number and the description data entry sheet. Now, this will the number will be required based upon the number of part numbers that you have. I believe on the exhibit that we have in the notebook, there are 7 part numbers per page. So if I had 7,000 part numbers in my part number program, I would need, what, 100 pages. And oh, that's only 700. I need 7,000 pages, okay? Or whatever that combination happens to be. The equipment and spare parts list is the 7th document. And in this case, again, you would need as many equipment documents as you do have equipment and assets. And here we're developing not only the equipment, but all the related spare parts that are an integral part of the maintenance program to maintain, through the maintenance program, the asset in top running condition. Item number 8 is a modularized approach to taking a very large piece of equipment and breaking it down into smaller data elements. So we'll be looking at each one of these documents and basically show you how it's put together in sections 3, 4, and 5. Okay? Now, starting off with the engineering part number manual, on page 1, we have the description to the part number. Now, you notice in the right-hand column, PN, that's part number. I have given you the ability to use 2, or those of you that are very large in size, meaning large in number of commodities, you have the ability to use a 3-digit first field. So if I have, let's say, 26 pages here, marked A to Z, It doesn't make any difference whether I have a 2-digit or a 3-digit first field. The first page is going to be marked A, the second page is going to be marked B, and so forth, okay? And in section 3, as I indicated, we have some examples. Now, if you turn to page 2, which is form number 2, this is where we cross-reference the part number first field to the description. And in this case, if I have a 2-digit code, I would only need 4 of these pages, assuming that there are 25 lines on a page. If you have 20 lines on a page, then you'll need 5 pages. Okay, that's all you need. And here's where we would cross-reference the first field to the description. And again, in section 3 and 4, we'll show you how that's accomplished. Now, page number 3 is the single page that is required, and this is going to be used over and over again in terms of the first field, 01 to 99, and in this case, I'm assuming we're using a 2-digit first field. If you have 3 digits, you're going to have many more pieces of paper, which would give you the ability to go from 001 to 999. And this document is a byproduct of the second form in the part number program, where I have cross-referenced the first field to the description, and that's exactly what we have here. So this is kind of a compilation of first field to description and description to first field. And don't forget, these are nouns. We're not having a complete description which would go into 3 or 4 or 5 words. We're trying to keep these down to simple, 1 syllable, if you will, nouns. Now, if I turn to page 4, we are now looking at the part number, format, and criteria for the individual part numbers. And again, it's important to note that we have an original date and we have a revised date. If I find that I have to revise any of the format and criteria, the engineering change notice principles apply here, so I have a good audit trail. We have also the major code, and that would come from the third document, which is really Form 3 or page 3 in this section. Now, down in the bottom section where we have our little blocks, we have blocks 3 to 15. So in this particular example, we have a 15-digit part number layout. The first field, which is in the upper right-hand side below the original and revised date, it doesn't have 1 and 2 identified as the first and second field. Since we're dealing with a 2-digit first field all the time, then we have first field, digit 1 and digit 2 represent that first field. If you have, let's say, numbers 1 through 9, you want to 0 fill that particular first field. Now, the other boxes on the bottom are going to give us the ability to develop the part number format. Format, again, is size of the field, and criteria is the description of the field. Okay? Now, if you want a 20-digit part number, then we would have to add 5 additional boxes. And that's real easy to be done on an 8.5 by 11 document by merely collapsing the space in between each one of those boxes that are identified, and you have ample room to go to a 20-digit part number. For this illustration, I'm just showing a 15-digit part number layout. Okay? Now, if you turn to page 5, which is Form 5, here we have the format and the layout for the description. Now, I have 25 digits here, and remember earlier I said you need at least 75. So we would have additional pages that would go to the right-hand side of this first page. So the second page would be identified 26 to maybe 50, and the third page would be headed 51 to 75. So in essence, I have 3 pages going from left to right, 1 to 25, 26 to 50, and 51 to 75. And I would put those together when I lay out my description, and we'll show you how to actually do this. On each one of the pages, however, we still want to have the original date and the revised date. We want to have the first field shown in case a page happens to get misplaced, and we find it a little later, we know exactly where that page belongs, what commodity it belongs to. And then we also have the description format, which is the size of a field. We'll show you how to put that together with the examples that are starting off in section number 5, and also the criteria, which is the meaning of the particular field size. So the 2 major source documents now to develop the part number and the description are Forms 4 and 5. Now the question, how many Forms 4 and 5 should I, let's say, print? How many should I purchase? Probably several thousand to get started. And if you need more, you're going to be able to develop some method of reordering. You know, when the pile gets down to 1 inch thick, you're going to have to start reordering more. Now, on form number 6, we have the data entry sheet. And I mentioned that this has a total of 7 part numbers, okay, per page. Now, in this particular case, I've expanded the description to a total of 50 characters. And we have the first line under the description goes from 1 to 25. Below that, we do not have numbers for those individual descriptive fields, but starting off under block 1 would be 26. And that would go 26 to 50. And then we would go to a third line if it is required, and again go 51 to 75. Now, if this seems complicated, and it may be easy for you to separate 2 or 3 lines per description, then you may want to separate the first descriptive line from the second descriptive line, and when you do that, then print above the second descriptive line, starting off at the left-hand side, field number 26, and show the numbers all the way to 50. If you have to add the third line, then you start off with 51 to 75. Because it is those numbers, 1 to 50 or 1 to 75, that are going to be translated from the part description format, okay, over into the description format here. The part number here is coming from the part number format and description form. So to try and tie form number 6 to the previous forms, the data from the part number comes from form number 4. The data from the description comes from form number 5. And another note. You notice we have page number of, okay? I said there were 7 items per page. And if you have 7,000 part numbers, you know you need 1,000 pages. 7 divided into 7,000. If you got 70,000 part numbers, you know how many pages you're going to need. Don't be penny wise and pound foolish to try and cram more part numbers per page, because this is the key source document that you're going to use to load the part number and its description into your program, especially if you're going to computerize. Once this is loaded, it's been verified that the data on here is accurate. It's been accurately loaded into the system. These can put into, you know, the archives, and they can be retrieved at any point in time. They should be filed by part number sequence, which would be the first 2 digits of the part number would be the individual items, the description, or let's say the family code, okay? So we'd go from 01 all the way through whatever we wind up with. We have one additional element to look at here, the date and the revision on here. If there's a change to this document, we found a mistake, an error, we want to correct it, let's change the date up here so that we always have a good audit trail from where we came from to where we are today. This is the data entry sheet. It must be 100% accurate. Now, if we go to page number 7, this is the equipment spare parts list. This is the document. Up on the top, we have the equipment number, and we have its description. That's on the left-hand side. Over on the right-hand side, we have the date, and we have the revision number. So you notice when we talk about the disciplines of engineering changes, we are practicing that in the new part notice system to make certain that as changes are made, they're recorded, and we have an audit trail. Now, starting off in the body of the document, you notice the first left-hand column is LN. That's line number. Those line numbers are actually printed on the form. The reason for that, if we have a part number that is on more than one page, and we're going to change that part number, the engineering change notice would not only indicate the equipment number and the part number that is going to be changed, but the line number associated with it, so we make certain that all part numbers that are going to be changed on 2 or more pages are identified on the engineering change notice form. That's a discipline. Now we have the part number / module. I'm just going to talk part number for a moment. I have a part number, I have a description, and if finance wants an asset number for a part, like maybe motors are being depreciated because of its original cost, we have the asset number. UM is the unit of measure. ICC is the inventory class code that I kind of briefly described earlier, and that really is supplied by the inventory management program. We have the P/UP. P is planned, UP is unplanned, and that's going to be used by the planner scheduler of the maintenance work order system, as well as the inventory management system. The quantity of the part used on the piece of equipment, and also the revision number of the part for the equipment, as well as the revision number for the equipment by itself. So you see, we're getting the disciplines of the new part notice, the engineering notice system embedded immediately in the part number program. And last but not least, the date line on the right-hand side is the date of the revision. Now, if we have a module, and a module is a section of a machine, then we go to the next page, and here on page number 8 is the module numbers. Now, in order to really address this, what I want you to do is to go one page forward, and you'll look at a piece of machinery, which is 102, and you'll notice that all of the numbers around this piece of machinery, which we'll look at in the tape in a minute, are identified as a suffix. It's a two-digit suffix. That suffix addresses a module. A module is a small operating feature of a very large piece of machinery. In this case, we would have the equipment number, and here we have the module number, which goes into the particular equipment, and modules could also go into modules. I could have a motor, and it has components or parts in it, and that motor could be an integral part of a module, and the module is an integral part of a piece of equipment. So we need this document for those of you that have large pieces of equipment or processes where we would want to modularize the piece of equipment. And that makes it easier for us to put in the part numbering system. It makes it easy to generate the equipment spare parts list, but really the benefits occur when we start to develop the different planned requirements for the piece of equipment, like the PM, the major minor overhauls, because it helps the planner scheduler to zero in specifically to the module and not waste time trying to find out where is this PM supposed to be done. It also saves time for the craft personnel when they're really going to go out to the job site. They know specifically through the diagram that we're going to look at in a second here where I'm supposed to perform that specific PM. So if you turn to page 8A, which is the last page in this section, there is that modularization that I talked about. This happens to be a computerized milling machine. It's an integral part of a CAD/CAM operation. The machine number is 102. Now, the suffixes going from 01 down in the lower right-hand corner all the way around the machine up to 102-13, that therefore represents 13 modules in this particular machine. Let me identify for you how I look at a module. Module 102-01 and 102-02 are electrical panels. Module 102-03 is the CAM portion of a CAD/CAM operation, so therefore this is a computer-driven machine. Module 102-04 are the safety features for that particular machine. The machine technically should not be able to function if that safety door is open. Module 102-05 is a hydraulic reservoir. Module 102-06 is the mechanical turntable. Module 102-12 is the cutting or milling or drilling requirements for that machine, and therefore we have X, Y, Z axis of transverse. And then we have additional modules that are going around the machine. When I developed the equipment spare parts list, I would have a page like page 8A, which would be the modularized page. I would have machine number 102. I would list all of the 13 modules. Then I would have a module page for each one of the modules, and it would have its own spare parts requirement. And then all of those module pages are all put together, and then I would develop the entire spare parts list for that piece of equipment. This is one of the easiest ways to install not only the part number system to develop the equipment spare parts list, but to use the part number system as I've indicated earlier. The key return is to improve planning and scheduling time and improve the maintenance time when we're performing maintenance activities on very large pieces of equipment performed by different maintenance craft personnel. When you modularize a large piece of equipment, as I've just demonstrated. The key benefits are twofold. One, it is very easy for the planner schedulers to develop the PM activities not only by machine, but by module or section within that machine, process equipment, building and ground, or whatever. Secondly, and here's where we get some real payback in terms of time savings, which represents cost savings, and that is the PM work order, the major or minor overhaul work order, would indicate not only by machine number 102, but by module number where that work is to be performed. So when the maintenance person goes out to the job site with a document like this, which is an integral part of the PM work order, that maintenance person, he or she knows exactly where to go to perform that work. There's no standing around trying to determine where should I perform this PM activity on machine 102. The modularized approach supports the reduction of creating PM work orders, and it supports the reduction of lost time by maintenance personnel when they are trying to determine where PM activities are being performed. Now, this concludes section number 2, and we want to now move into section number 3 and look at some examples of the first field of the part number program using the first document, document number 1, which was identified in section number 2. In section 3, we're going to show you how the first field example is developed. And I want to have you look at page number 1 now. And I promised you a moment ago that I would show you form number 3 again, where we have the first field and we have the descriptions of the first fields. If you remember, I also referred to those as nouns. So starting off with page 2, in the upper right-hand corner, you're going to notice that A represents those commodities that start off with A. So in our example here, we've identified 2 commodities within the page A, abrasives and adhesives. Now, I haven't put any first field part numbers here. The thing we want to do is to walk you through the development of the part number program. We start off with A, and now I'm going to go to the next page, which is page 3, and here we have, which is actually the B page, or the second page in the alpha characters, and you notice everything on this page starts off with B. Batteries, bearings, belts, belting, building, heating, building cooling, bolts, and brushes. Now, as we continue on, you're going to see some other exhibits, and those would be found on the C page, which is page number 4, and in this case we have all of the commodities that are identified by C, starting off with chargers, battery chargers. Now, in some cases, you may have batteries and you may have battery chargers. It really doesn't make any difference to me whether the battery charger is on the B page or chargers, comma, battery are on the C page. This is where you have the flexibility of developing common terminology within your own maintenance shop. Then we continue with cable and chain and cylinders and so forth. So everything on the C page starts off with C. Those are the nouns that I have been talking about. Now I'm going to go to the F page. which is page number 5 in this section. And here we have commodities like fans, fasteners, filters, finishing supplies, fittings, and finishing and shipping. So we could add additional commodities to the F page. The last 2 pages in this section are the R page, which is page 6. And again, everything on the R page, the nouns start off with R. Rivets, raw materials, and retainer plates and bolts, refractory materials, regulators, regulator kits, receptacles, and recorders. And the last page, page number 7, is the S page. And here we have commodities, again starting off with S, sealants, slings, screens, shipping supplies, etc., and etc. Now what I've tried to do in section number 3, take a few examples for a few of the alpha characters and show you how to develop the single noun, if possible, on each one of the pages A to Z. Now, the definitions that I have here, I've selected out of some of my clients' individual part number programs. Don't try and copy these. If you have your own terminology for certain items, use it. Don't try and reconform the entire maintenance operation to some terminology that they are not accustomed to. Examples that I've developed are very easy for you to be able to develop. These come from the first page of the 8 pages in our part number program. Remember I said you needed 26 pages marked A to Z. I've just selected a few. I've selected some of the terms for these commodities from some of my clients' previous part numbering programs. And it's very easy to put this together. You should have no difficulty. If there are some terms that may be foreign that somebody may come up with, try and bite the silver bullet and come up with one term for that particular commodity code. Now what we're going to do is we're going to show you how we cross-reference these alpha pages, which is Form 1, to Form 2, which is the numeric page. Now, in Section 4, we have the first field to the description. In Section 3 that we just finished, we had the description to the first field, but the first field was blank. So here's where we're going to start to fill in the blanks. Now, you'll notice that on page 1, okay, I have used a 2-digit first field. And in this case, I have 22 lines, not 25 that I've been talking about, and I even earlier referenced 20 lines. In this case, this form has 22 lines. So I know that I'm going to have more than 4 pages. So the first page is 1 to 22. The second page is 23 to 44. The third page is 45 to 66. The next page is 67 to 88. And then finally, the last page is 89 to 99. So in this particular case, I have used 5 pages. Now what I want to do is to go back to the page number 1 in section 3, and that is the cross-reference to the first field, to the first field designation, and this is where the form number 3 from Section 2 will help you to pull together the master cross-reference between the first field number and the first field description. And remember, if you have categories like general, electrical, mechanical, piping, lumber, etc., you want to be able to take the numbers 01 to 99 and set so many numbers aside for these major categories, and now you can start assigning the first field to the individual descriptions, and then go back to section number 3 and fill in the first field to the description on the A to Z pages. And guess what? You now have a complete cross-reference from the first field to the description, and the description to the first field. And guess what? You're ready to start assigning part numbers, and that is going to lead us into section number 5, where I'm going to walk you through what other companies have done relative to examples for these particular commodities that we're going to walk you through. Section 5, we're going to start off with bearings, as I indicated, and it won't be long until you'll have a very good handle on how the individual part numbers and their descriptions are developed. Now that we have completed the introduction to the maintenance store's part numbering system, which we covered in section 1, we have gone through all of the various forms or documents where those were covered in section 2. We looked at the development of the noun to the first field, which is section 3 or form 1, and we also looked at the development of the documents where we went from the first field to the noun, which is section 4, and actually that was the second document required in the part numbering program. We looked at the composite of both the first field and the description, which is that one-pager that went from 01 to 99 with all of the various descriptions relative to that particular commodity or family. Now what we're going to do is look at 4 sections from section 5 through section 8, and look at various applications in the development of the part number and description itself. Starting off with section 5, I've selected the bearings because this is a rather standard commodity code for just about every maintenance shop that I have worked for. It gives us the greatest flexibility going from the highest order of identity, which is the first field, through the second and third field, and then subsequently, since most of the companies I've worked with have many different types of bearings, it gives us an excellent opportunity to see what companies have done to develop the description, part number, and the description format. So with further ado, I'm going to look at the commodity code 04, and this is shown on page 1. Now again, what I'm doing for each one of these sections is to start off with the storeroom material code, call it the commodity code or the family code, and you notice I have circled 04. On all the next sections, I will likewise circle the sections that that particular section pertains to relative to the part number, format, and criteria, and the description, format, and criteria. Now, the first document that we're going to look at actually addresses the part number, format, and criteria for bearings. And again, in this particular case, we are dealing with a pre-formatted part number software program which has 8 digits to it. I made reference earlier that you should never get software until you have defined the requirements of the part number system, both part number and description, and then look for the software that will support it. Well, in this case, this particular company did purchase the software first, and originally we had 10 digits for the part number and 25 digits for the description. Because of the coding of the part number itself, we could not make any changes to it. However, we were able to have the software house develop the layout of the description and increase the capacity from 25 digits or characters to 50. But irrespective of the potential problem, we were able to satisfy all of our requirements to develop the part number system. However, one of the things we could not do is to incorporate dashes between the various fields. And I want to address the fields at this point in time, and then we'll actually go through page by page the various part number and the descriptions relative to this very large, if you will, family called bearings. In this case, in the upper right-hand corner, the first field is 04, and 04 represents bearings. In addition to bearings, there were bearing accessories that were added to the 04 field. So in the major code in the top portion of the engineering and part number manual, we've addressed bearings and accessories, and you notice we have page 1, and we also have a date, a starting date for this particular item. So the first 2 digits, or the first field, okay, is 04. Then the next thing we did is we went in and determined the types of bearings. And in this case, it was determined that they're going to have more than 9 types. So therefore, there was a selection to use digits 3 and 4, which is the second field of the part number, to represent the types. So we start off with a ball bearing, series 100, then 200, and 300, and 400. And then we continue on with the ball angular contact. We continue on with the ball cartridge replacement, and you see that's a accessory. We have the ball cartridge unit, and we have the ball double row bearings. Now to the left of the description of the type of bearings, you will notice we have the second field identified by its numeric number. Starting off at the top, the ball 100 series is 11, and then we continue on 12, 13, 14. You'll notice item 15 was skipped. That is in case we had to add something into that particular series. So we leave room for expansion. Then we go from 16 to 18. There again is a little room for expansion. And then we continue 18 through 20. So we have identified for this page, this exhibit, the particular ball bearing and its related accessories. Now, the third field, which is the fifth digit, is the style. And therefore, we are looking at the different styles of ball bearings. So in this case, the series 100 to 400 had 3 different styles. And those styles are represented by the 1-digit character, which would go into the 5th position of the part number, but it is the 3rd field of the part number. And this is really important as you go through the development of the part number and its sections. Start to use some common terminology. And let me see if I can help you in this case. We talk about a digit in the part number. That represents the numerical place that we are in the part number layout. When we talk about the field represents the format, the field size. When we talk about the description, we're talking about what that field represents. So the 3rd field in this part number layout is for digit 5 of the part number, and we have for ball bearing series 100 to 400, we have 3 styles: open, sealed, and shielded. And those are represented by the numbers 1, 2, and 3. So if I were to, at this point, ask a question, what would be the part number for a 300 series ball bearing that is sealed? 300 series ball bearing that is sealed. Well, the part number would go something like this: 04 13 3. And that is how the part number is actually developed and put into the load sheet when we are finalizing the part number and its description. Now, we haven't gone into the digits 6, 7, and 8 on the part number itself, but I'm merely trying to show you that as you start to develop the layout of these various commodities and their classifications, you can immediately start to develop the part numbers, at least relative to the data that we have. Now, in the top, we had page 1. I'm going to go to the next page, and in the middle of the top, we have page 2. And again now, what we're doing is we're going to continue on with the other applications, and we're going to develop sequentially now the numbers for the individual bearings and their accessories. So with page number 2, you notice we have now added the 2nd field, starting off with 21, which is a ball ER series. And we continue down the left-hand side of the part number format and criteria page, where we have, at the bottom of this page, we have the 2nd field identified as 26, ball pillow block. And again, we've associated the different styles for each one of those particular ball bearing series and their related accessories. Going to page number 3, and I'm using the top line to identify the page numbers. Bearings and accessories, page 3. And that's the way I will be referring to the pages, not the page number in the notebook, but the page that it is identified in this particular series. Now here, starting again with the 2nd field, digits 3 and 4, we've now expanding and adding more different types of ball bearings, or bearings I should say, and accessories. So on this particular page, are now adding additional bearings and accessories. Second field, 27 all the way to 36. We've also indicated the styles. Now, if there is no style associated with, let's say, a bearing or an accessory, you notice we leave the third field, which is the 5th digit of the part number, blank. So the third field for 28, the second field, 29, 30, those would be blank. We would actually zero fill that when we develop the part number. The same application would hold true for the second field of items 35 and 36, which are down at the bottom of the exhibit. Now, going to page 4, we are now adding additional bearings to the bearing commodity code. And here again, we're starting off with the second field, 40, and moving all the way through 58. Now again, there are numbers that are left blank. They're not used in the second field, and that gives us the ability to expand later as new items are added. When I go to page 5, and you notice we're only working with the second and third fields as we go through this development. The last field, which is really the fourth field, digits 6, 7, and 8 are going to be assigned sequential. And sequential starts out with the first bearing within a subclassification. That sequential number, since we have to use for this software all 8 digits, the first bearing number assigned for a specific subclass, and the subclass is defined in the second field, would be 001. If I use the same subclass, the second field, then the second bearing in that subclass would have a sequential number 002. So I am just adding one additional numeric character, and I'm progressing in sequences of 1. And that is what we call sequential ordering relative to the development of the last field in this particular exhibit. So here we're adding the second field, 59 through 74, which is on page 5. And on page 6 now, you notice we have indicated 99 miscellaneous. We didn't put any other additional information in there. And if you remember, the 99 code was going to be used for those items that we couldn't identify. They had no relationship to any particular equipment or other asset. And at some date, after we're through with the part numbering program, we have all of the material in the storeroom cross-referenced. That is, the material that currently has a part number and will have a new part number assigned to it. Once that is done, we're going to have to pull out of the storeroom all of the 99 codes. Now, since we're talking about commodity bearings 04, then the part number for those so-called miscellaneous or undetermined items, its part number would be 0499. And we'll put all of those items together, and then we would have to develop a committee, which could consist of some maintenance personnel, maybe the supervisors, facilities engineering, or anyone else in the organization that could lend its experience to determine whether that item is going to be used or not. If there is a consensus of opinion that that item will have no future use, then we have to develop our method of disposition. Before we dispose of the item, we must clear this with finance. We want to make certain that that item if it's on the books, and that is the financial value is on the books, then we're going to have to download or reduce the asset value based upon the individual value of that old part number, and how many are in the bin would have to be multiplied by that quantity, and that extension would have to reduce the book value. If finance says these have been completely written off or they were expensed at the time we ordered them, then those items have zero book value, and they are candidates truly for not only obsolescence but for final disposition. Now, the next page, number 7, addresses the development of the description, format, and criteria for the individual bearings. You will notice in the major code line where we have page 7, we address the specific type of bearing. So we go back to Ball 100 series, and that item was the first bearing that was an integral part of the ball bearing series. And you'll notice we bring the second field over here into the development of a kind of a semi-part number. 0, 4 is bearings, 11 is Ball 100 series. So we are now having a complete cross-reference between the part number page, that is the part number, format, and criteria, and here we have the description, format, and criteria. Now, we start off with the first digits going from left to right, and again, you notice we have the numeric progression of 1, which is really the record layout of the description. So the first 2 digits, digits 1 and 2, identifies the bearing number as required starting with digit 1. And then we have 3, which is left blank. And there really should be a notation here that digits 3 or digit 3 is left blank. Then we get into the next field sizes 4, 5, and 6, and down here at the bottom where that arrow ends or where it starts going from the bottom up with a notation 1, after the next or after the number, the next digit A blank, okay? And then you continue with 1, you go to 2, it says after the number shown, bearing letter for sealed, shielded, and open. So the progression for the description is tailored to your specific requirement, and the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 gives us the roadmap on how we're going to develop the data relative to the description. You'll notice that there are terms like after blank write sealed, shielded, or open. Sealed, shielded, or open are different sizes, but we're in a descriptive or an alpha field. And if you remember from section 1, we said when we're in an alpha field, they are left justified. So we are going to start off with 15, and we're going to write the term sealed. Now that's going to be expanded, but this is strictly an illustration. So if 15 is the starting point to put in the words sealed, shielded, or open, then we need a maximum of 8 digits for the longest word of those 3 types of bearing, which is shielded. And therefore, sealed would be 6, and the next 2 digits would be blank. If I have open, which is 4 characters, then the next 4 characters would be blank. If we wanted to sort at some later date, based upon the subclass of the Ball 100 series, we could go directly to character number 5 and sort descriptively based upon the type of bearing, sealed, shielded, or open. And remember, since this is an alpha field, it's left justified, so we sort from left to right. And in this case, the first sort would be open, because O would precede the S, and then sealed would be second, SE, and shielded would be third, because H, it follows E. So this is a left justified sort. And as I said before, when you're in a numeric field, consider right justified, zero fill. When you're in an alpha field, you go left justified, but do not zero fill. Leave those blanks. Now, I want to continue to page number 8. And here we're again talking about the bearings and a continuation now of the Ball 200 series. So what we're doing is we have a page in the part number application which addresses many, many different types of bearings, but over in the description section we have 1 page per type of bearing. The cross-referencing is always the identification of the commodity Ball-200 series, and then the layout is for that particular 200 series. Well, in this case, since we are in a Ball series, then most of the data on here would be identical to the 100 series. Now, you'll also notice that starting off with digit 21, there we are identifying a manufacturing coding scheme. And if you remember earlier, I said where there are industry standards, it is okay to put the industry standard, part number, and its description in the description of that particular item. So in this case, we are addressing the SKF series, we're addressing the FAG series, we are addressing the FAF series, and also the ND series. Now those are specific manufacturing designations. And in many cases, we may have one manufacturer, we may have 2 or more. The manufacturer's name, based upon the manufacturer that we're going to order from, would be in the purchasing system, not in the part number. Remember, we said one of the do-nots is don't put the manufacturer in there. But we're doing it in the case of trying to have some correlation between our new number, our own description, and tie that in with some industry standard. Now, going to page number 9, we are looking at the Ball 300 series, okay? And in this case, the 300 series and the second field is 13. We have basically the same layout, and you notice the disciplines of the layout. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. Those are the steps. We're very methodical when we lay this out, because the part number and the description, okay, have to be in specific fields, and those numbers that are blanketed, okay, indicate the steps that have to be taken. And that is basically the guidelines for the people. Maybe they're different from those that are putting the part number and the description documents together, or they could be the same individuals that will be assigning the numbers, will be assigning descriptions on our load sheet. And that gives them the continuity of the way the part number and the description is going to be addressed. As this exhibit illustrates, page 10 of the ball series, that is the ball description series. We're now looking at the 400 series, and you'll notice again on the second field in the upper right hand corner we have 14. 14 is the second field for the 400 series. Now we're going to move into the next series, which is the ball angular contact. Now this is an accessory, and you'll also notice that our criteria for developing the description is completely different now than the previous exhibits that we've looked at for descriptions. Here we're talking about the bearing number as required, starting with digit 1, okay? And then we go with note 1 after the next, after number, next digit is a blank. So wherever that blank occurs as we're assigning our numbers and our descriptions, it's a blank. After the blank, show the letters as required, okay, for that particular accessory. And then we'll continue on and develop. We've got the manufacturer's name and that capability. So this is specifically the way the part number description is developed. Here we have bushings. And again, the second field is 17. And again, I want to reference that correlates with the second field in the part numbering system. And this is the type of discipline that is required relative to the cross-referencing of the part number and its specific description. Now here we have another layout for the description. The first 2 digits is the shaft size in inches. If inches are not used, it says 0 fill because that's a numeric field. Okay, we don't leave numeric fields blank. There would be an assumption that somebody left something off. There's always a dash in the next field. And then when we get into digits 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, because they kind of work together, we're going to be talking about fractions. The upper fraction half of the shaft size would be digit 3 and 4. Leave digit 3 blank if less than 10. Okay? Digits 3 and 4 blank if fractions are not used. So as we start to develop the sizes, we're leaving, or assigning, I should say, the instructions as to how the description is going to be put together. And remember, in section 1, one of the elements we said do not do is to put dimensions and sizes and so forth in the part number. Put it into the description, and this is basically what we're doing. And then we get into moving up the ladder with note number 1. After next number digit is a blank, and then we show the manufacturing name, and then we get into other data requirements. Now remember, this is for a specific company. It's not indicated here or provided to you that you're going to copy this, but hopefully it's going to give you the flavor for the disciplines and the organization of not only developing the part numbers, but also the description. Now we're moving into the cartridge replacement bearings, an accessory for ball bearings. And that happens to be second field 18. And here again, we have all of the data elements going from digit 1 as far out. And in this case, we're talking about 25 digits, or excuse me, 28 digits in the layout for the description. The next page in 14 is for cartridge complete units, and that happens to be the second field number 19. And again, you notice the disciplines where we have the numbers boxed in 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. It succinctly tells us how we're going to assign the description for this particular subclassification. As people start to develop the method in which description is going to be developed, you're going to find that there could have been errors in the layout. Don't get excited about it. It's real easy to go back and make changes. See, we haven't assigned part numbers yet. We're in the, call it the embryonic stage of where we have the format and criteria of the part number, and here's the format and criteria of the description. And now we're going to get into double row ball bearings, and that happens to be the second field as indicated by item 20 up here in our first and second field box. And again, the disciplines, 04 is bearings, 20 is always ball double row. And here again, we have the development of not only the bearing part number, but we have also now we're showing the manufacturer's name. That's the manufacturer of the bearing by specific code relative to how that manufacturer is identified in the bearing industry. Okay. The next exhibit is the ER series, and that happens to be 21, description and format. And again, everything is laid out relative to how we're going to assign the description and the format for those particular bearings. Now, the next one, we're getting into what we call extra small bearings. And here again, we're limited in terms of the data that is going to be used to generate the extra small bearing. In this particular case, as in others, the description is formatted to meet that specific subclassification of a bearing. And you know, you've heard me repeat this quite a few times. I cannot impress upon you the degree of accuracy that is required when you start to lay out the description for the sub and subclassifications for each and every commodity within the bearing field. We also have now the layout for flanged units. And again, remember, and I'm going to repeat this several times as we go through the balance of the notebook, this is tailored to meet this company's requirements. The flanged units, its subclassification is second field 24. And here again, we starting off with the flange type, starting with digit 1, and then we move into blank, which is after the digit 1 is completed, and then we show the number, delete if the number is not used, and we continue upward where we start to get into now such things as dashes, and where we have fractions, we have the ability to say always use a dash or always use a slash when we're getting into fractions. And that's consistent, so anybody that's going to sit down at a later date where I have a new part notice that comes in, and let's say I have a new bearing, which is a ball flange bearing. I go to this page, and well, first of all, I go to the ball bearing flanged part number page, and I do recognize that it is part number 0424. And if there are no additional numbers after the first 2 or 3 fields, that is a direct duplicate of the new item. I have to develop a new part number. So therefore, the new part number would be 0424, whatever that second style happens to be or subclassification. I'd add the next open sequential number, and then I would follow this type of a format to develop its description. So when we talk about engineering part number manual, which happens to be up on top, the top heading, this is a document that is not going to be put in the archives. We can computerize this. We could make a menu out of each one of these exhibits, but the key is that we have consistency throughout the part numbering program from day one until day infinitum. Now, if we go to the next page, which is page 19, we have inch dimensions again for the ball. And this happens to be 0425. And again, the same applications occur. And I'm going to kind of walk through the balance of these just to give you an indication of the data elements that go into the description. Now here's the pillow block bearing, okay? Part of the ball bearing family. And this is the way the pillow block bearings are identified relative to this company's requirements. It's tailored. The next page addresses the self-aligning ball bearings. And here again, that happens to be second field is 28. So if I wanted to get the format or the layout of the description, I get into this particular page here, and it will tell me specifically how the format is laid out. Format is field sizes, and criteria is the data that goes into that particular subclass within the bearing family. Now we have take-up ball bearings, and that happens to be second field 30. And again, you notice the description changes. In this case, the second digit is always a dash. That's down at the lower left-hand side. 3 and 4 is upper half a fraction. And the terminology, upper half a fraction, is used consistently, as we saw from previous exhibits where we were talking about fractions. The fifth digit is always a slash. And so we have a numerator, if you will. We have a slash. Then we get the denominator, which is the lower half of the fraction. And again, if it's less than 10, then you leave item number 6 blank. And if you do not have any fractions, then those are basically, in this case, blanked. Some people could zero fill them. That is strictly how you want to address what has to be done in your particular part numbering program. Continuing on, this is the truss ball bearing, second field 31. And you notice again, we have a different layout, and there are notes such as if there is the lettering series are not used, zero fill the lettering series. Note number 1, after the lettering series, always put a dash. See, we're separating the description. Those dashes are very key. It gives us the ability to sort by specific field size. And then we get into the second note after the dash, or show the bearing number. And after the next number, it's blank and so forth, okay? And continuing on now, we're on page 24, unground ball bearings. And that happens to be second field number 32. Starting off with the first field 1, we have the bearing number. Then after that, the next digit is blank. In this case, we're not putting a dash in there. We're leaving it blank. We can sort on that blank. And then we show the manufacturer's name. That's all the data that is needed for this particular unground ball bearing. We get into the miscellaneous items for ball bearings. These are miscellaneous components. And here we have the bearing number starting with digit 1. Again, the next note, leave it blank, and continue on to where we have the manufacturer's name. We could, at some point in time, sort wherever that manufacturer's name happens to fall within digits 16 to 27. We could sort all of our bearings by manufacturing name through the description, and guess what we would have next to that description by the manufacturer's name? The extended description and the part numbers. And that could be very useful, not only for standardization, but it can be useful for the purchasing department to look at all of the new part numbers that have been assigned to those manufacturers with their old number. A very easy way to do a cross-reference. Continuing on, page number 26, we have the balls relative to the ball bearing family. And again, we have diameter in inches, and if it's not used, it's 0 fill, okay? There's the second field is a dash. Then again, we have the upper half of the fraction. We have our, in field 5, it's always a slash, and we continue on. And I'll just walk through a couple more with you just to show you the consistency going from one second field to another, that the language is consistent and not necessarily the instructions, because the instructions are all different going from one subclass to another. Here we're talking about bronze Babbitt-mounted bearings. And again, we have the layout where we have the size in inches, and if they're not used, we 0 fill, because that's a numeric field. The second digit is always a dash, and then we get again into the fractions and continue on accordingly. The next page on 28 is the cam follower, and this is for a roller bearing, and again we have a very simplistic layout for the description, and anyone that understands the description of a cam follower roller bearing could sit down and not only assign the part numbers but also the description, which leads us to a very key point. Who should be doing all of the development of part numbers and description? The users. The mechanics probably would be doing most of this particular development work. And once they've gone through this, it would be real easy for the mechanics to maybe train some junior apprentices, or maybe clerical support from the maintenance office, or even clerical support outside of the maintenance office. We could have junior facility engineers participate. The key is, once I get the roadmap established, I get the plan laid out, the development of the part number and the development of the description is relatively easy. Continuing on page 29, we're talking about the cartridge unit for the roller bearing. And again, you can notice the same type of application, the succinctness in which the data element is laid out. And I'll continue now on a few more different applications here. Here on page 30, we have flanged units for the roller bearing series. The second field is 54. Again, it ties in with the second field and the part number format and criteria page. And also, you'll notice the way the data elements are laid out. Going to page number 31, we have the pillow block roller bearings. And again, the same format is there for your perusal. I'll go through the balance of these pages. I'll bring them up one by one just to show you how this one company and many others have followed a similar format, not necessarily the same dialogue, maybe not necessarily the same way that it's described here, but if you would go through this section as many times as is required, so you become totally familiar with how the part number and how the description is laid out, then my recommendation would be to take a half a dozen or so different bearings that fall within the bearing subclassifications, and look at the descriptions and devise your own part number and your own description and see how much of a change you would have to make to these source documents, which hopefully may help you to shorten the time span for bearing, okay, part numbering generation. And in this case, again, we have the second field, which is 56. The first field, always 04 bearings. And for pillow block roller bearings, again, we have the same succinctness of the development of the description. The next exhibit, page 32, is pillow block split roller bearings. And in this particular case, again, we have all of the layout shown relative to the pillow block split. The next page, on page 33, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself, or falling one behind, is the roller spherical bearing. And again, we have the bearing number, the next digit is blank, we show the manufacturer's name, then any additional information that is required. Now this spherical roller bearing undoubtedly is somewhat institutionalized with certain manufacturers. And there would be probably, and I don't know if this company did it, but it would be my recommendation for specific manufacturers' part numbers where we develop our own part number. I would show the various part numbers for that manufacturer, and there's no reason that we can't cross-reference in the description our new part number with the manufacturer's part number for that new item or new part number. In this case, we're completely closing the loop, and we have the current usable manufacturer's number. And I know a lot of maintenance people talk the lingo of the manufacturing name and part number, and in bearings that happens to be one. I know some electrical connectors, they talk about the different manufacturers' names and numbers. And again, you can superimpose that right into the description, not into the part number. Here we have straight bore roller bearing. That's the second field, 59. And here again, we have the data developed for the description. We've got about another 7 or 8 pages relative to the description here. Here's a take-up roller bearing. And again, the way this is laid out relative to how you would develop the description for that specific bearing. The next one is a tapered bore roller bearing. And again, that's the layout. And these are in the notebook for your specific perusal. Use them. This is part of the education that is going to be required not only for bearings, but for other classifications, commodity codes, subfields. And I think if you go through several of these different commodities that we have in a notebook, it should give you a fairly good indication as to the thought and the process and the succinctness in which the part numbers and the descriptions are defined. In this case, on page 37, we have another thrust roller bearing, and that happens to be second field 62. And again, we're showing the layout of the way the description is defined. We get into page 38, and we have miscellaneous roller applications. And again, this would be more for the accessory applications. And again, there is the layout relative to the method in which the description would be defined. The next one is the bronze sleeve standard sock. Now, boy, this exhibit is full of notations. And I think we should take a minute and look at the way these notations are defined. The first digit, outside diameter in inches, okay, 0 fill of inches are not used. The second field, coming down with that arrow, down at the bottom left, always a dash. The third and fourth field, coming down, it says outside diameter. Upper half of fraction, leave digit 3 blank if less than 10. Leave digit 3 and 4 blank if fractions are not used. So in this case, we're not zero filling, but we're leaving it blank. Then we go over into digit number 6 and 7, which is the outside diameter. We've gone through that. Now digit number 8, you notice we got to follow the line. The note down at the bottom of the center says always blank. And then we go up to 9 and 10, follow the arrow down. It says always letters OD, and guess what that means? Outer diameter. So rather than try and spread out and make the description larger, and remember, we're locked in here with a 28-digit description. We bought the software before we found out what we needed. We're trying to compress all of the data into abbreviations wherever practical. Then we get into item 11, and that is always a blank. Then we get into item 12, that's always an X. And then item 13, okay, and that is always a blank, and so forth. The thing that I want to impress upon you is that it takes time to put an exhibit like this together. Don't let anybody rush you. You're not under the gun to finish a part number program within a certain period of time. I have talked to many, many top management people where we have developed our services relative to helping them design part numbers. And I will tell you, I tell every top manager exactly what I'm going to tell you now. Don't rush. How can a person put something as succinctly as this together if I'm under the time gun? There is no time gun in the development of a part number program. If we wanted to look at a part number program realistically, I would say 9 to 12 months to complete a program. Because remember, the first mission that you're responsible for is the maintenance process. This is kind of a side job, but it's not a part-time job. It's a full-time job in terms of dedication. So we may have to spend a few hours a day in this development. But once it's developed properly, the assignment of the part numbers and the descriptions are very easy because we've laid the plan out properly. Now, continuing on, we have just a few more to cover here. We have bronze standard stock sleeve, okay, and that happens to be an accessory. And again, that's all laid out with the description, but I want to point out one thing. You notice in item 39, it indicates the type of material. Start with digit 39. Now, I also want to mention one thing. A moment ago, I said we were tied in with a 26 or 28-digit description. It was about this time where we were able to, as I mentioned earlier in the program, we're able to double the size of the description. And you'll notice what we did here is we have page 39A. That is tied in with the preceding page 39, and the second field is still 69. However, the digits go from 29 to 56. And so we went from 28 digits to 56 digits, and we were able to expand the requirements. The last page is for the bearing accessories, and this is the data that is required, and that happens to be the second field, which is 74. And that really concludes all of the part number format and criteria, and the description, format, and criteria for section number 5. I think you could appreciate the time that it took to put this together. It's one of the most popular type of commodity codes in a maintenance part numbering program, and I thought it would be appropriate to share this with you to show you that other companies have gone through it, and by God, if they can do it, so can we.